Good morning, LA pipe smoker, with my weekend pipe video. I've had a pipe blend, pipe tobacco blend, that I've been wanting to review for quite some time. I have way too many pipe blends, I think. Too many tobaccos, so I need to kind of pare back a little bit. I typically smoke maybe 4 or 5 in rotation, but every time I come across something that looks interesting, I kind of grab it. Very, very similar to my reading habits. I do really look at the covers, and sometimes it just looks interesting to read a couple of the first pages, pick up the book. I think having a Kindle helps a lot with that, because I'm not taking up space physically with a book that I'm not certain that I want to buy. But I've got to do a little shout out to Curtis over at Law and Smoke. You know, he has this whole book review series that he's been doing, and introduced me to the work of H.P. Lovecraft, which I've heard of, but I've never really read much. Got an entire collection of his works. He's a writer of short stories on my Kindle, and I gotta tell you, H.P. Lovecraft's really great at crafting these little short stories. I mean, they're short stories. Also a great big fan of Flannery O'Connor. If you haven't run across her work, you got to check it out. Not for everybody. Kind of the pure Latakia of short story writers, with maybe a little Perique added in, or maybe a lot of Perique added in. Never thought about that before. Book reviews and tobacco reviews together. Maybe there's something to that. Have to think about that. Today, the tobacco that I'd like to review is from the vintage collection of Cornell and Diehl, the Castillo, I think, because it's Italian, Ciroc. They have come out with a number of blends in that kind of vintage collection, and I wrote them down here. Fiammata, which is a vapor. Their collection blend, which is kind of, Virginia, red and bright Virginias. Ciroc is a Weber, so Virginia and Burley, and some Cavendish in there as well. And then the fourth in that series is Old Antiquari, which is an English mixture. I've never smoked it, and just calling something an English mixture, I'm guessing maybe Virginias and Latakia and some Orientals in there. I don't know, but the one I'm going to look at today is the Ciroc. It's been a while since I've really smoked a typical aromatic, and so I was kind of interested in giving that a shot. Whenever I smoke a new blend, or a blend I'm not sure I want to do something with, I smoke it in my Meerschaum, and that's a big help, because in a Meerschaum pipe you're going to get virtually no ghosting. You don't build up a cake in a Meerschaum, and the Meerschaum gives you, I think, a truer smoke of the actual blend. So let's take a look at the tobacco. The tin note is actually quite strong. When I first opened it, I received a really strong chemical. Now, that's not unusual for opening a tin that's been sealed for an aromatic, because all aromatics usually are going to have that topping, and topping is a little bit different than a casing. Most tobaccos are cased. They're infused with something other than the pure tobacco itself. But topping is a chemically added flavoring, literally sprayed on top of the tobacco, and that's what gives sometimes the aromatic that little chemically smell to it. I aired it out a bit, and now I can really appreciate the tin note that is kind of a, I don't know, butterscotch, maybe a little bit of caramel, without the harshness of that chemical taste. So I aired this out a little bit, a couple hours this morning. I've been smoking it most of the morning, and I'm almost at the bottom of the bowl in this one. There's the burleys in this is what really gives it a lot of the smoke. And I think unlike a lot of aromatics with burleys, the burley hasn't quite been saturated with the flavoring, which is kind of unusual. Usually the burley really soaks up the flavoring itself, but I can kind of taste that kind of more benign nuttiness, which is a little unusual for a Weber. Usually the burley portion of an aromatic really takes on the role of delivering the aromatic elements, in this case kind of butterscotch and caramel. But I really can taste a little bit of that easiness that I don't normally associate with an aromatic. Usually with an aromatic, sometimes it can get a little harsh, and this isn't the case with this particular blend. I'll show you what the tobacco looks like. Bring that up for you. So you can clearly see the Cavendish and the Virginias in there, and maybe even a little bit of the burley. It's not too expensive. They sell them in, Cornell and Diehl sells these in 2 ounce and 8 ounce. I got the 2 ounce, and this will last me for a couple of months probably. I'll get this into some kind of mason jar or something to kind of keep it fresh. Although, believe it or not, just keeping it in a tin like this will be good for a couple of weeks. It won't really dry out with that. In that for a couple of weeks. It's a little over $10. I think I paid $10.62 for 2 ounces, which is kind of medium, not exorbitant, but not exactly discount brand. And I've really enjoyed it so far. I'm smoking this in the morning. You can see when I see smoke like this, I think 2 things. I either think somebody is smoking one of those vapor cigarettes, or they're smoking burley. But it's really quite a delightful smoke, and I highly recommend it. Most of the flavoring that I do get in this tobacco is on the exhale. Virginia's, burley, and black Cavendish. So that's the makeup of the Castillo brand, sub-brand of Cornell and Diehl's Ciroc. Should have taken this with me to Carrillo and smoked it on the Cirocs. Oh well, maybe next time. There's something else I'd like to share with you today. I woke up this morning thinking of my father. And in my life, I've had 3 fathers. I've had the father who gave me birth. I Or I guess he didn't really give me birth. He participated certainly in making me. Um, he was my birth father, and I was given up for adoption at birth. And from what little I know about him, I know that he comes from a long line of folks that lived in Louisiana. He was mostly French, or a mostly French background. And was a mechanic, an aircraft mechanic, which I find kind of interesting because I'm a pilot, a private pilot. I've loved flying all my life. So we share that in common. Other than that, I don't know anything about him. Do know that I like Cajun food, so that might be a little bit in my blood. I do like my Cajun food. Or grub. I don't know. I don't know how much of that is just imagination or not. But when I woke up thinking of my father this morning, I thought of my third father. My second father was the one that adopted me, along with my mom, and he died when I was 11. My mother remarried, hence my third father. He's an amazing man. And he comes from Texas. Came from Texas. I gave him a hard time too when he first married my mom back in 72. My other father died when I was 71. I really put him through the ringer. He was very patient with me. Never would raise a hand to me. Raised his voice a couple of times. Big guy. Played in the Cotton Bowl for Texas University as a center. But a very patient, a very wise man. And when I was younger, I don't know, maybe it was because I was a teenager, but I was really, really uptight. I mean, in terms of, not smiling, and I know that's kind of the teenager thing, you just kind of, but I don't know. He had a way of giving me lessons that weren't lessons. I mean, he taught me by kind of examples. And one of them I was thinking about this morning was that shortly after we moved to upstate New York, we did a series of family vacations. And one of the places we went to was Fort Erie. And, excuse me while I reload my pipe here. Wow, smoked it all the way down to an ash. So anyway, we went to Fort Erie. And they have people there dressed as redcoats and the like. And usually as a teenager, when my family says they were going to go on vacation, usually I was kind of like, I want to hang around. I don't want to go on vacation. I don't want to do this weekend trip and blah, 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 blah. Bit of a whining kid, And my father would never say anything. The only thing my father would say is, when we get in the car, me and my brother would kind of moan together. He would say, kind of in his Texas drawl, he'd say, now, we're going to go to Fort Erie, and we're going to have a good time, and you are not going to upset your mother. And that's all I have to say on the matter. And, we roll our eyes, and off we went in our country squire station wagon. So we went to Fort Erie. And I was moping around. And my father was wearing his floral 70s kind of a disco shirt, gray slacks, and that kind of southern style, white belt and white patent leather shoes. I remember telling my father, I remember telling him one time, he said, "Dad, you really have no charisma." My father just kind of chuckled and said, "Yes, son, but I have a bank account." Anyway, the story that I was thinking of was, in particular, this story of us coming to watch this parade that they had for the tourists. And the parade would consist in a kind of, it's a marching parade with the redcoats, and they'd be playing their drums, and they had their muskets and all that kind of stuff. And we were watching this, and I noticed my father was nowhere to be found. And I asked my mom, I said, "Mom, where's Dad?" And she had that kind of smile on her face. My mother could get this little Mona Lisa smile. And she said, "Son, your father has a present for you." And sure enough, in about a minute, I saw that present. And that present was my father. Sorry, it's so funny to think of. My father had joined the parade and was marching at the very end behind the soldiers marching. I was horrified. And I remember the lady standing next to me turned to my mother and said, "Don't you just hate it when men drink?" Which was equally funny because my father didn't so much as sip a beer when I was a kid. He used to smoke cigarettes. And smoked them for over 20 years, and he went cold turkey, old school. No patch, no therapy, no electroshock. Just stopped one day when he found out about the effects of secondhand smoke on kids. He just stopped. I remember he got physically ill and would in the morning sometimes vomit. I was really concerned. My mother said that's because he gave up tobacco, he gave up nicotine. And how addictive cigarettes are, unlike pipes, which aren't addictive at all. So the lesson I think my father was trying to teach me was to kind of lighten up a little bit. Just lighten up. It's all right to have fun. It's all right to make an ass out of yourself in public. And, and I have made an ass of myself in public. Most of the time, not intentional. But I think the gift of being able to laugh at oneself, being able to have a good time, to live in the moment, is something that my father gave to me. Now, I didn't get it right away, but it infused itself in that memory and other memories like that. And I do have, believe it or not, a picture of my father in that parade. I've told this story to my students, and of course they're like, "Oh, that's BS. That didn't, come on, Skull, that didn't happen." No, it happened. I always bring the picture to show them. Here's a picture of my father marching in that parade. I don't know focus isn't great, but you can see the guy at the end waving. That's my dad. That's my father. Thanks, Dad. So, as we smoke our pipes this weekend, whatever's going on, it's okay. We can always lighten up. Have a great weekend.